Courtney Fairchild, President and CEO of Global Services, and welcome to our next installment of The New Normal, where we talk a little bit about the challenges that COVID-19 has created for all of business owners, and even more specifically for government contractors. Today, as you can see, I have my dear friend joining me, Guy Timberlake, the Chief Visionary of SCIIF. And SCIIF is renowned for their federal intelligence and being able to help companies win more federal contracts. So Guy, thank you so much for joining us today. I am thrilled to be able to.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you. For my generation and the ones right behind me, this is obviously unprecedented beyond government contracting, but even in government contracting. And so it's far reaching, and the emotional toll I think it's taking on folks is also just off the charts. It's forcing us to modify our behaviors, personal and professional. And the really only good news is Uncle Sam is still doing their thing. And so if there's a shining light in all of this, is that, you know, those of us that have already been vested in this community, and even those that are still newer to it, still have an opportunity to make a living.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Back to the personal side, you talked about, you know, having to have changed behaviors, both professional and personally. What does your personal life look like that's different? How are you dealing with the emotional side? Because I think that's really the key to all of this. We can continue to plug along on our business side, especially because the government continues to spend. But how do you deal with that emotionally?
You know, the American Small Business Coalition and now SCIIF have been a home-based business for 16 years. And so that wasn't a real change for us, but not being able to go outside and play with our friends, that was. Yeah. And literally, and more, you know, for our daughter. I mean, just, no, you can't go to your friend's house. And no, they can't come over was tough. And so personally, it is that lack of contact. You know, my daughter, you know, thankfully started going back to school a few weeks ago. She goes, you know, on premise, you know, socially distanced, the whole thing. And I'm telling everyone, look, I know my daughter loves me, but after 6 months, she was sick of seeing my face. And so her demeanor completely changed when she got back to school. And so I got to believe every parent and everyone is feeling something like that. I am not one. I'm risky as hell in business, not so much personally, especially when it's, you know, things like this. And so I'm not willing to take a risk that puts my family or anybody else at risk. I don't begrudge or judge anyone for where they are in their belief right now. And I'm going to respect everyone for where they are with this. But you know, I've had this conversation a number of times. If we get the all clear flag today, it's going to still be another year before anybody gets back to, not anyone, before a lot of people get back to anything that looks like normal.
From business owners as well as from family and friends perspective, you're going to meet people where they are. What I choose to do and what you choose to do may be slightly different. They may be exactly the same. They might be slightly different. But I think it's really important that we respect each other and meet everyone where they are, what they're comfortable doing. Right? One of the great things that I loved about your Simplified acquisition training was being in a room with 20 people for the 2 days and enjoying the meals and getting to know the other business owners. So I know that delivery model has changed. So I'm going to let you tell me a little bit about that, and then we can jump into more about what the Simplified acquisition threshold is.
No, sure thing. I mean, look, I just did a post the other day on LinkedIn. It was one of the pictures from one of the boot camp lunches.
I saw that.
You know, about 20 of us around a table, you know, everyone, you know, the camaraderie, a little grub, you know, having fun. And everyone, you know, in the pic is goofing it up. And that's honestly probably as important as anything we teach people in the class is just that fellowship. One of my favorite places is at the front of the room and just kind of talking to people
You
and
love
sharing
that.
some information and getting them fired up. We took the exact same approach and just stuck it in Zoom. And so when folks come in for the first 2 days, the immersion, we just do 8 hours a day on Zoom for 2 days. And it's still the same breaks built in,
Okay.
the lunch break built in. The boot camp breakfast is now the boot camp coffee chat. Show me your cool mug, and we talk for 30 minutes before we start the class. We've been doing about 2 a month since March.
That's really great.
And so the delivery has changed. I will tell you the participation and the interest in the outcomes is not, and it's pretty cool.
Well, and more readily deliverable to everyone around the country. Now is a great time to take some of your time to train on the things that you may not have necessarily been able to get to Nashville
Correct.
to do, or DC for that matter. But I have found that from our client base, they're taking the time to do training and find a little bit more time without commuting to be able to do some other things. So let's get into our topic. For those that are watching, Guy Timberlake was kind enough to provide us with a blog post that's on our blog this month regarding simplified acquisition. One of the things that you will see and that we all know is that the amount of simplified acquisition is just increasing over the years. It's being used more and more. And so that's wonderful. I made the assumption, and I'm going to ask because I don't know, I make the assumption that COVID-19 pushes that and propels it even further. So if you could tell us what the simplified acquisition threshold is very
Sure.
quickly, and then talk a little bit about what you've seen in your research.
Absolutely. And so simplified acquisitions, first and foremost, is just a streamlined method of purchasing for the government that gives them ways of doing buys quicker, with less burden on them and industry. And so the traditional burden, the statute is $250,000 per contract action. There are 2 exceptions to that threshold. The first one is an exception that used to be updated annually, now it's permanent, which allows for the contracting officer to apply a threshold of $7 million when they determine that pretty much all of what they're going to buy is considered a commercial item. Now, here's the trick. When people hear commercial item, they think product. And commercial item is product or service. The other exception, and I mentioned this in the blog, is kind of where we are now. When a disaster declaration is made, when the head of an agency says, USAID says we have to go support a humanitarian effort in this country, or FEMA says we've got to go support disaster operations in this state, the head of that agency can then declare that emergency, and that threshold then goes to 13 million. And that's where we are right now, is agencies have the ability to use a threshold of 13 million to make purchases in support of COVID-19 and Laura or Sally or any of the other things that are going on right now, the fires in the West. But right now for COVID, it's 13 million, and we've seen an impact on spending this year.
How do I understand as a potential federal contractor? How do I better understand research and keep abreast of the regulations? You're talking about different levels at different times because of certain factors that come into play. How do I keep best abreast of all of this, and how do I help drive that business towards me?
So, I mean, and there's a number of ways to do it. I mean, there are different services, free ones and fee-based ones that will help you do this. I rely on the Federal Register quite a bit to just be updated on changes, whether it's a new policy, law, a deviation from a current process, an update to the process. That's usually good for me. Every agency that follows the FARS is a supplement, and that supplement is on their website typically, and that drills down into exactly how they're going to do it. If you're looking at simplified acquisitions, a lot of agencies have specific departments that are responsible for those types of buys. So a lot of times it's really just focusing in on a specific customer. And it's that intimacy we always talk about. It's got to start earlier, because if you're looking at too big a picture, you're going to just get a lot of noise. If you can really rein it in to a specific segment, you can pay more attention, capture more detail, and you become smarter. And even if it's simplified acquisitions, it just allows you the ability to consume the information and make use of it.
And amazed at the tips and tricks that you give people within that boot camp. There are things that I just never think about. And the one that always comes to mind are the codes under which the government buys, because we tend to think we know our NAICS code for purchase. And
right.
You have taught me that what, the government thinks they're buying under something and what I think I'm selling might not necessarily be the same things. Do you have to be a data geek in order to be able to understand simplified acquisition? Tell me what kind of person I should be focusing on this kind of work.
Honestly, basic understanding of using the web is where it starts. If the person has an inquisitive nature, even better, because then I'll really turn them into an ethical stalker. But more than anything else, no, you don't have to be a data geek, because, when you look at some of the principles of, what a simplified acquisition is, again, it's anything between a micro purchase and the established threshold. So that's $10,000 to $250,000. So anything under $10,000 is a micro purchase. It's not an FPDS, and it's not going to show up on FBO or now SAM. So anything that is in the simplified acquisition threshold above the synopsis threshold, which is 25,000, may show up in the old FBO, now SAM. So there's two things. If you're on FBO, if you've got search agents in there and you're looking at certain organizations based on what you want to sell, and you're tracking RFQs, you're tracking the phrase simplified acquisitions, because it always comes up, because they always insert the clause in the body of the solicitation, you'll see those in there. But here's the trick. Those buys that you're seeing, again, are above the $25,000 threshold. So the number one thing I tell people to do is take down that person's name, phone number, email address, and depending on what they're buying, call them and say, hey, do you ever have any below 25,000? If so, we'd love to be on your list. Give us a call. We're responsive. We have great pricing. We're dependable. And the U.S. government spends billions of dollars under $25,000 every year. So that's one, and that's not a data geek. That's just someone that can go mine the information that's relevant to your company on FBO, again, SAM. If you want to be a data junkie, though, we can take you into FPDS, and you pull up all the information based on every organization of interest to you that has executed a purchase that way. And now you've got a complete history down to the contracting office level, city, state, address of who's doing it. Then you call them.
Well, I appreciate everything that you're saying. We have a long-standing running joke between Guy and I. We've known each other for 20 years, and I've always been the GSA and contract proponent, and he's always been the simplified acquisition. Always good to see you. You're one of the most outgoing people I know, along with myself, so I know that we're struggling in COVID. Guy also put me to shame with his background today. That's actually his backyard. So I think he's trying to throw it in my face. But other than that, you're doing just fine. Thank you again. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. I will be back next month with another topic, but thank you for your time and have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.